the stretch by Robinson. The 3-0 pitch. Swing a long drive. There it is. Number 500. The career 500th home run for Michael Jack Schmidt. And the Phillies have regained the lead in Pittsburgh. 8-6. And the Phillies dugout comes swarming out to home plate.
Phillies Talk Podcast is now listener supported. Just go to our Patreon page at Patreon, patreon.com/Phillies, and you can sponsor this podcast.
Welcome to Phillies Talk, the independent podcast from FightinPhillies.com, featuring news and views about Phillies baseball.
Hi, this is Gary Matthews. You listen to the Fightin' Phillies podcast.
And thank you much, Mr. Gary Matthews. Yes, this is the Phillies Talk Podcast, the longest-running independent show about the Philadelphia Phillies. My name is Rich Baxter, and on this show we're going to be talking with a very special guest, Mr. Matthew Veasey, coming up a little later in the program. And we're going to review the first month, as it's in the books just about here, the month of April, drawing to a close 2017, talking about your Philadelphia Phillies. And of course, there's some good news to talk about with the Phillies, and of course, on the other side of the coin, some bad news as well. But let's get the good news flowing here on the program. The Fightins opened up the season on 2017 on a positive note out in Cincinnati, and I didn't want to do a podcast for the first couple weeks into the season because you get a little false sense of hope after the first week of the season or even the first 2 weeks of the season sometimes, especially if your team starts off on a winning note. It's easy to fall into a trap that you're going to run the table, you're going to run the NL East, so to speak. A lot of teams have had some early success, like the Mets. They played very well for a 10-day span, and then they fell flat on their face, and now they're on the bottom of the NL East just about as the month of April draws to a close. But let's review just how the Phillies have been doing so far this season as April is concerned. Of course, the Phillies are 11-11 as they're out in L.A. for their first West Coast road trip of 2017. But they started the season off in Cincinnati, and they started off real positive with a win. Opening day was April 3rd. Jeremy Hellickson opened up the season for the Phillies, and Hellickson's been on fire for the Phils ever since. Of course, he's in that contract year again, and he started off with, believe it or not, a 4-0 record with the Phillies. So he's on his way of having a great season individually. The Phillies, 11-11, as we said, to start off this year. I think last year they were 14-10, so they had a good start off last year. This year they have strung together a couple impressive wins, and they probably would have 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 more wins if it wasn't for the bullpen being so terrible lately for the Phillies. They've been blowing games. They've been just holding on in other games when the Phillies have had the lead. I think we could probably be seeing a 16-17 game winning team here in the first month of the year if the bullpen would have held up. But that hasn't been the case so far. We saw Jeanmar Gomez start off the year with his first save in Game 1 against the Cincinnati Reds. He seemed to be the guy that the Phillies were going to stick into this role. They went with him a myriad of times last year. Played a ton of game for the Phillies in the closing role in 2016 and done quite well on it. Well, ever since that first game in Cincinnati, Gomez looked very shaky when he would come in to save a game. Just couldn't seem to get many people out when he needed to. He suffered the loss on April 14th against Washington, another tough loss there, a 3-2 loss in that game. But since then, it hasn't gotten much better. They've had Neris closing a lot of the games, and even Benoit closing a game or two here and there. Neris has been the man as of late, and everything caught up with him last night in L.A. as he gave up back-to-back-to-back home runs to the Dodgers. And if you remember the back-to-back-to-back theme, of course the Phillies hit back-to-back-to-back home runs as well at home in Philadelphia. It was only the 8th time in club history that the Phillies have done that, a very rare feat. So if you were at the game, you saw a piece of history there by the Philadelphia Phillies. But the game is very strange. You'll hit 3 home runs against the team, and then last night Neris gave up 3 home runs, and the Phillies dropped a tough game against the LA Dodgers. They were leading 5-2 going into the bottom of the 9th, and it just all fell apart for Mr. Neris. And what I noticed was there was no input from the manager or the pitching coach. Here he had given up a home run in the bottom of the 9th. Okay, it's 5-3. We still got 2 runs ahead, but the second home run should have sent 12 alarms off in that dugout, and it just didn't. Even the television commentary of Tom McCarthy and Ben Davis noted that there was no bullpen action up at any time. I believe they did get the bullpen warmed up after the 3rd home run. So after the game was tied and basically lost, so to speak, not lost yet, but on an emotional level, they finally activated somebody in the bullpen. So that's little things that just can't be done. A manager has to go out there, if not after the first home run, surely after the second home run, and you have to either instill some confidence in your reliever, a guy that you're calling your closer, you're tapping him to come in and close the game, or send your pitching coach out to talk to him if you're not going to take him out right away. I just don't understand the way McCannon thinks sometimes. In the post-game show, he had a brief interview about how he's not naming a closer for this team for whatever reason. He doesn't want to put added pressure on anybody. But if you get the ball in the bottom of the 9th or the bottom of the 8th inning, you know you're that guy that's expected to perform and do well for the club. You don't have to be told it. You've got the ball. It's the bottom of the 9th. You got a one or 2 run lead, and you're there to preserve it. So you know you're the man. You don't even have to tell anybody that. So McCannon's endless replies of this in certain game situations, I think he should be taking the blame himself a lot of the time, and he does not do that. He deflects the blame. He's not acting like anything involved in this is because of him, and his inaction to do anything most of the time is exactly what's causing this. Come on, get a clue. Go out there on the mound, settle the guy down, or bring in somebody else. If you don't have a named closer, why are you sticking with Neris all the time? Or Benoit, or whoever you have in there. Gomez, if you throw him back in there. If you don't have a closer, take him out. God, I just can't understand it. But anyway, that's my first rant of the season for 2017. It felt good to get it out, actually. But coming up in the program, we're going to be talking with Matt Veasey. He's going to give me his opinions on the Phillies. We're going to talk all about how this Phillies team has been a little bit different this year. A lot of good things are expected of them. So far at home, there's been a very good warm reception for them. They've been averaging around 25 to 28,000 per game at Citizens Bank Park. And this is a team that's been finishing last, and last by a number of games in the NL East. They've been, frankly, the last 2 years, they've been a horrible team. And it's a credit to those fans that are still purchasing tickets. They're still going out to the ball game now. 3 years running since this team, I guess you could call it terrible. This would be the 3rd season for me. So coming up after this break, we're going to bring on Matthew Veasey, and hopefully he'll settle me down and calm me down a little bit, give me a little hope for the remaining 5 months of this 6-month baseball season. There's a whole lot of play to go on here. Barely 10%, 12% done with this season already. So we've got a whole lot of hot weather baseball coming up, and I just can't wait to see more. I just wish the Phillies would be more consistent at certain things, especially relief pitching. They also need an improvement on hustling. I've seen in the last 10 days, I've seen 4 or 5 glaring plays where some of these players, and it's not the same one every time, but they take their turns. It's Franco one night. It's Galvis the next night. It's Herrera the next night. They hit a ball and they start jogging the first. You know, how many times have we seen that this year so far? It's getting kind of like a broken record with this team. Some of these guys aren't respecting that they're in the major leagues and they're supposed to run every ball out. I don't care if they ground it to the pitcher. Get your head down and run to first. That's what you're paid to do, and that's what you should do on every play. Dig hard on every play. That's what you have to do. You're a major league ball player. Rant number 2. All right, coming up after the break, we'll have Matthew Veasey right on the other side of this commercial.
Sponsor an ad on the Phillies Talk Podcast. Support our show and let people know about your business. Email us today. Follow us on Twitter at Fightin' Phillies or on our website, fightinphillies.com.
Hi, this is Farley.
And Mark from Baseball PhD.
Thanks for listening to BaseballPodcast.net.
Up next, another great episode of Phillies Talk.
Hi, this is Gary Matthews. You're listening to Fightin' Phillies Talk Podcast.
Brewtown Sports is your source for Brewers news and notes. Join Mr. Brewtown as he keeps you up to date on all the happenings of your Milwaukee Brewers and Major League Baseball. Follow the show on Facebook and Twitter, Brewtown Sports. Listen 24/7 at brewtownsports.podomatic.com.
Hi, this is Gary Mack of Mets Musing, and you're listening to my good friend Rich Baxter on Phillies Talk, right here on BaseballTalkRadio.com, the home of great baseball talk shows.
Podcast. We're bringing aboard a longtime Phillies fan and blogger, Mr. Matthew Veasey. How you doing, Matthew?
Doing good. How you doing, Rich?
All right, and you're a longtime Phillies fan, just like myself, and a fellow blogger in the biz, so to speak. Why don't you let our listeners know where you can be found on the web?
Well, I have my own site at mattveasey.com. It's MATTVEASEY.com. I put a lot of my stuff on that. All my baseball stuff, Phillies related stuff, plus a few other topics that interest me. But for my baseball stuff specifically, I'm writing now with Call to the Pen, which is a fan-sided site. So at calltothepen.com/Matt Veasey, you can find me there.
Very great. And on Twitter, I know I've hooked up with you a few times. I love your Twitter comments. You always try to keep me positive most of the time. I edge towards the going off the deep end sometimes, especially with what we saw last night in L.A. But how can people find you on Twitter as well?
Yeah, I'm a glass half full guy mostly, Rich, but it's hard after games like last night. Twitter, I'm at my full name. It's Matthew Veasey. It's MATTHEWVEASEY. So you find me at Matthew Veasey. And by the way, my Call to the Pen, I just looked it up. It's calltothepen.com/author/Mattman3rd, MATTMAN3RD. So that would actually be it. Or you can go to the Call to the Pen main site and go into the About section. And in the About section, they have all of our authors there listed. And you can look at all their works.
Very cool. So Call to the Pen, that's another great Phillies-centric type of blog. And
Call to the Pen is all across Major League Baseball, Rich. And I do a lot of Phillies-related stuff, but I also do other teams as well.
Nice. So check out that baseball talk there over at Call to the Pen. Very great to have you on the program. And I know we talked the last program a little bit about how we thought the season was going to go and things. So already we almost have our first month of play, official play, into the books here. Phillies started off pretty good in Cincinnati with an opening day win. And then we saw Jeanmar Gomez he looked pretty good on the first game. Then he dipped down a few games, and all of a sudden he was the worst name in town.
Yeah, he was never really a closer in my mind. He was the option that worked last year, and he worked for a few months, but he ran out of steam. And I don't think anybody who had two eyes, who has any experience watching this or playing this or evaluating this game over any period of time, could see that Gomez wasn't your classic closer. I didn't see that lasting, and it didn't surprise me one bit. I don't think he should have had the job out of spring training, personally. What happened last night does derail, at least temporarily, the guy who I did think should have had it right out of spring training, though. And of course, we're talking about Neris's implosion last night.
Yeah, Hector Neris certainly seemed like he had good stuff in the beginning of the year. As we know, he wasn't named the closer, and so far McCannon hasn't even named the closer for this club. He sort of just hands the ball to whoever he thinks should get the duties on that specific night. And lately it's been Neris. Neris has been sort of walking on thin ice, probably about a quarter-inch thick there, Matt, on a lake sometimes, because he gets into trouble so often. And last night, as you mentioned, he gave up back-to-back home runs to the Dodgers. And now we know how it feels to be hit back-to-back because we actually did that on offense about a week ago or so. So it's not as good being on the other side of that coin. No.
I mean, Neris was fantastic, everything he could want for his first 8 or so outings, but the last handful, he's just been, I don't know if it's the pressure of trying to finish the games or what gets to him. Maybe he needs that mindset adjustment. Somebody needs to work with him on his mindset, but he hasn't done well. And looking at his record, like 4 out of the last 5 appearances. And, of course, last night's was a total disaster meltdown.
Yeah, now, speaking of meltdowns and disasters, we've had a few with the starting pitching rotation on the Phillies. Clay Buchholz apparently lost for the season now. The Phillies signed him for $13.5 million for just one season. And at the time, it seemed like a fairly good deal, possibly, if he could deliver for the Phillies. Well, the first 2 weeks into the season, he's now out for the rest of the year. So that puts the Phillies starting rotation into a bind. And, of course, Aaron Nola ended up on the DL, the 10-day DL. He's going to remain on there a little bit further. And we might not have heard the whole story about Aaron Nola either. So today in this afternoon's game in L.A. to end the series, we're going to see a new pitcher in Pivetta coming up from the minors for the Phillies. I don't know too much about him. I haven't really followed the minors too much this year, but I hear he's on pace to maybe do well with the Phillies.
Yeah, it's shades of 2016 Charlie Morton all over again. I mean, the Phillies signed Charlie Morton a year ago to be that veteran, 1-year kind of stopgap guy along with Hellickson, and same thing. He's lost within the first few weeks of the season, never to be heard from again. And that could be very well what we're dealing with Buchholz here. So, throw him out the window now as far as I'm concerned. Nola is more troubling. I think they tried to avoid surgery with him, and, the fear is, all along, would that hold up? And now it looks like we're having some problems. I'm not saying they're related to the same issue we had last year, but, it does beg the question. So the good thing for the Phils is that they really do have some really good, it looks like good quality, young pitching depth coming from the minor leagues. And Zach Eflin did a good job last night, before that implosion. I liked him last year. He looks good so far this year, and I really like him at the back end of their rotation. And now, as you said, Pivetta coming up. He was lights out so far this year at Lehigh Valley. He was 3-0 with a 0.95 ERA. In 3 starts, he allowed just 12 hits in 19 innings, and he had a 24-2 K to walk ratio. So he was pitching fantastic. So you got to hope that he comes up and gives them some semblance, even just some semblance of that kind of production.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing him pitch, and like you said, it's an opportunity for some of these guys to come up out of the minors, and all of a sudden maybe they weren't supposed to be on this roster till next year. They got the early call due to injuries, and it's a great time for them to continue that good play on the big club, hopefully to continue that and start off their major league career like that. They could be almost like a star is born on a team. So sometimes when a player goes down, you're unhappy about that, especially Nola, Buchholz, your quality starters, so to speak. But it's also, on the other coin, it's just an opportunity for some of these younger guys to come up and make themselves known, and maybe they'll just tear onto the ball club and carve themselves a spot that they'll stay in.
Sure, and Pivetta looks like he's ready. I mean, he's 24 years old. He's been pitching in the minor leagues for the last 3 or 4 years, so it's not like they're rushing him. He's ready for this opportunity. Phillies fans will probably be especially happy if he does anything. If he turns out to be something, we got him for Jonathan Papelbon. So Phillies fans will be especially happy if he can do something.
Yeah, and as you said, Zach Eflin last night had a wonderful start. It was just a shame that the Phillies couldn't close out that win. They had a 3-run lead. I generally fall asleep on the West Coast games before they're done. For some odd reason last night, I figured, let me leave the TV on, let me watch this, let me see the Phillies get this win. And I just could not believe it. I felt like, well, I was cheated sleep. I knew that right off the bat. But
Sure.
As soon as they got tied, I knew the Phillies would probably end up losing that game, and they did. But you just never know with baseball. You could be watching it ahead 5 runs, 1 inning, and the next inning you're down by 1 or 2.
That's true. That's true, but this was shockingly fast. I mean, they entered that 9th inning with a 3-run lead, almost coasting in, had it set up right. Here comes Neris, just the guy you want in there, even though he had a couple shaky innings lately. He figures this is the right guy. Dodgers seemed like they were asleep a little bit. And, I was ready to go to sleep. I mean, I had you mentioned Twitter earlier. My traditional Phillies win tweet is something along the lines of put this one in the win column for the Fightin' Phils, the old, victory call there.
Right.
So I actually had that typed up. I'm typing it up. Put this one in the win column for the Fightin' Phils, getting it ready, getting a nice little fanatic dancing gif, to put with it, and watch the home run. I'm like, oh, this is nice, a home run. And then you get another one. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. And then the third one was just ridiculous, by that point. And then, I kind of thought he might take him out. I kind of thought Pete might take him out after the second one. It's you can't even talk about a game like that. It's almost a throwaway appearance. The question now becomes, what do you do with Neris? I mean, it's such a meltdown. You wouldn't throw that. You would not throw him out of the closer role if that was it, and he's been lights out so far. But he was lights out for 8 appearances. 3 out of 4 before last night, he wasn't. He struggled. So now this is kind of a pattern now. This is almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. So how long do you go with him? Do you stick with him and hope that he builds up some confidence in this role? Do you drop him back a little and put Benoit back in there? It's a tough call for Pete. In short term, maybe it's better if they go with Benoit and drop Hector back to the setup role. But I still think in the long run, Neris has closer stuff. They got to get him to the mentality part.
Yeah, and the fall of Jeanmar Gomez was so spectacular to me. I don't really think he deserved to fall as fast and as hard as he did with this team. Last year he was in 70 games for the Phillies, saved 37 games for the Phils. He wasn't terrible last year. Now I understand this year he got off to a rocky start, but as you just said, Neris has been on that thin ice, and it broke on him last night. But I think Neris has been a little bit worse than Jeanmar ever was this year, and I just can't understand why all of a sudden, I know towards the end of the year, last year, Jeanmar Gomez started to fall apart, but the whole Phillies team fell apart as well, and they went down the drain, so to speak. But so far in 2017, I don't think they gave Gomez the respect that I think he earned by saving 37 games for the Phillies last year and appearing in 70 games. I mean, they used him pretty well last year. He got a lot of work in, 68 innings total for the Phillies. And in my opinion, he didn't do as bad as I think other people have been lumping him in. I read an article in today's Inquirer, Matt Gelb, sort of saying that, we could let Jeanmar Gomez go and that would be fine. But I don't know where that sentiment comes from. I don't think he's earned that yet from the Phillies, that ticket out of town. But, this town is a little strange, and if you get that tag against you sometimes, it's very hard to overcome it. We haven't seen much of Gomez for 2.5 weeks on this team. So we'll have to keep our eye on that bullpen situation. As you said, it's going to be interesting from here on out.
Yeah, Gomez, I already, gave you my opinion in the beginning. I mean, he was never a closer to me. He had a nice 3 or 4 month stretch last season, and then he was gone. I mean, from his last, just looking at it from the middle of August to the end of the season. So we're talking about a good 6-7 week stretch here at the very end of the year. His ERA was over 13. He let in 29 hits over 15 innings. He was getting whacked around for the last 6 or 7 weeks. So that's what he was. He wasn't, Pete could stand on, he saved 37 games. Well, he saved 37 games, but also for the last 7 weeks of your season, he was getting crushed. So that has to be a factor. And then in spring training, he didn't earn the closer role. He didn't do anything to earn it. Whereas Neris last year, Neris's ERA after the All-Star break last year was just a tick over 2. He allowed 23 hits in 33 innings, 45 to 13 K to walk. He was pitching like a closer for the last 3 months of the year last year, and had the role by the end of the season, which I think was the right role. I think Neris should have been anointed their closer after the season and going into this year. Maybe that would have helped his mindset better if he knew in spring training, you're the closer, and he would have been able to piggyback off of what he did last year and take that mindset into this year. But I think the indecisiveness of Pete with that role, and then maybe giving it back to Gomez, who had fallen apart at the end of the year and was never really classically a closer. I think that had to. I just think that was problematic from the beginning, and it's proven to be problematic now. So we'll see what they do from here on out, but it's something he's going to have to deal with for sure.
You're listening to Phillies Talk Podcast, and I'm talking with Matthew Veasey. He's at MatthewVeasey.com, and also Call to the Pen. It's a baseball-centric site that writes all about baseball, and you can find Matthew's work there. And Matt, the Phillies, they're currently in second place by 1 full game. Miami, Atlanta, and New York are right behind, knocking on that door, though. I'm very happy with 11-11 so far this year. I wish, with those other games that the Phillies have blown late in the game, they could have been maybe 15 wins already. But 11-11, I'm somewhat happy with, especially in second place.
You're right. I mean, I think that this is if this team at the end of this year is a 500 team, then we have to be happy with that. I predicted them to be short of that. I predicted this to be, maybe I was hoping that they'd finish with a couple of more victories than a year ago. I don't think that they're a 500 team, but I think that they have that capability if they stay healthy, if they straighten this bullpen out, and if they don't get too far into the pitching depth, if they don't suffer too many more injuries, they should, health and straightening out this bullpen are going to go a long way to determining whether they can make that run at 500. But to me, at 500, you can't be unhappy with. It's early, though. I mean, if you remember last year, they were something along the lines of 7 games over 500 in the middle of May, and we know where last year ended up. So it's early. I wouldn't get too happy or too sad about anything right now. Getting this bullpen straightened out is probably the big thing right now.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was saying on the first half of the show before I brought you in here. So, yeah, we're both on the same page as being, it's early yet. Don't get too happy. Don't get too sad. Let's look at the offense and the pitching a little bit. That's been a bright spot for the Phillies so far in 2017. The batting seems like it's improved. Maybe Matt Stairs being in the mix with the Phillies has helped this team. The leaders so far, Cesar Hernandez with 4 home runs, as well as Michael Franco. Batting average has been Hernandez with 326. He's been a lot of the Phillies' offense so far, Cesar Hernandez has been.
Yeah, Hernandez has probably been the one guy, I would say he is the one. I just made this comment on Twitter the other day. He's the one guy who is winning me over. I didn't believe coming into this year. He started me believing a little bit last year, but he's doing it again so far anyway. And he's starting to win me over. The thing about Cesar you have to remember is he turns 27 this summer, which is not old, of course. But in baseball years, with a rebuilding team that you don't think is going to contend really for another year or two, probably 2, then he'll be 29 then. He's not like he's a 24-year-old kid who they're going to be building with. He's going to be getting to 29, 30-year-olds age when they're ready to contend again. So it'll be interesting to see how they move forward with Cesar, especially with a guy like, seeing how a guy like Kingery develops.
And as you said, I was on the fence as well with Cesar Hernandez. I wasn't a big fan of his in the last year and a half, but he has won me over. I see a little bit of shade of Chase Utley in him when he's at the plate. He's got that short, compact swing. He hustles. He doesn't say much. He's not a very vocal kind of guy, and he doesn't get embroiled into many controversies. He always hustles. You don't hear his name mentioned when you have guys lollygagging down the first, things like that. And we've seen that a lot already with this team this year. A few of the guys, hit a ball, it might dribble up to the pitcher or someone like that, and they're just jogging half-heartedly down the first. That galls me more than anything, but Hernandez seems like he hustles every play.
I'd have to agree with you there. I think it's borderline sacrilege to be talking about Chase Utley, but and I think most of your fans would probably say the same thing. But I understand where you're coming from with that. I think Cesar's the big thing with Cesar to me was previously he would do some really good things, and then there would be something boneheaded, usually on the base paths. Made me go shake my head, and this guy really isn't going to be a key factor going forward. But he, at least so far, it's only been 3 or 4 weeks. He is hustling. He's cut down the mistakes, and I like what I'm seeing so far.
Very awesome. Well, on the flip side of the coin, on the pitching, doing fairly well as well, even given the fact that we've had a couple big injuries with the starters. Jeremy Hellickson off to 4 wins already. His ERA is 1.80. Also leads the team in strikeouts, 11 strikeouts with that. And he's off to a wonderful start, so he's going to actually, I misspoke there. Jared Eichhoff actually leads the team in strikeouts with 28. So Eichhoff's having a good year so far, and Hellickson is having a good year so far. And we just hope with Peavy starting off today, maybe he'll have a good start off with the Phillies, and maybe they'll be able to plug the slight hole that erupted with the starting pitching. But they're fair to middling so far with pitching, and the offense I'm happy with. So if they can keep that up, I think we might have something to talk about as the months go on. I don't want to get too optimistic or too negative with this team, and that's why I really didn't do a podcast in the first week or two of April. It's just so fresh. It's hard to have anything to talk about that you can be substantial with. So here we are almost in May, and it was a good month so far for me.
Yeah, they're right about where they should be, I think, or where we could have best case scenario hoped they would be. You figure last year, they finished with another losing record, towards the bottom of the standings again. If you looked at the statistics, they were towards the bottom of all the statistical categories. Right now, after the first month of the season, they're a 500 ball club. Statistically, if you look at all the key stats, they're right in the middle now. I mean, pitching, you were just mentioning pitching. Their batting average against is 17th in the league, which is basically middle of the road. Looking at hitting, their OPS, which is a good, measuring stick for their overall offensive production potential, they're 12th in all baseball. So 17th in one of the key pitching categories that I always look at, that batting average against, and 12th in OPS offensively. They're middle of the pack in most of the key offensive and pitching stats, and they're 11-11. So I don't know where they can improve. That's the thing. You look at this team and you're like, where can they improve? Maybe if some of these kids come up and Alfaro, but there's a lot of talk, and I've seen good reasoning for it why Alfaro wouldn't come up till at least September. So, Crawford's struggling. So who is it that's going to come up and really jumpstart the club from the minor leagues from an offensive standpoint? You mostly think that if they're going to improve, it's got to be from the guys that are here already. Ken Saunders, does he have another gear that he can kick his game into? He's been a little uneven so far as production goes. Howie Kendrick, can they get Kendrick back into the lineup, and what can he give? Tommy Joseph's been, he's been disappointing so far this year. So there are some places where they can get a little more production that can possibly, I won't say kick them to a playoff spot, but certainly give them momentum to stay at this 500 level offensively. The pitching, I like the talent. Even in the bullpen, I like the talent. I think that it's there, and I think that the depth from the minor leagues is going to help them overcome 2 or 3 injuries. So I really do like this pitching staff over the course of a year to be able to tread water, at least at that 500 level. The offense, that's going to be the question mark for me.
Yes, indeed. Well, the Phillies taking on the Dodgers as of the time we're doing this podcast are in danger of getting swept out there, down 2 out of the 3-game series already. But we'll see how it goes. And to close out the podcast, Matthew, you had a real tough job in the last couple of days. You were over at the NFL Draft in Philadelphia, and for anybody that is maybe not a football fan, or maybe you live outside of the country and you're listening to the show here on Phillies Talk, the NFL has taken their draft on the road, and this year it was in Philadelphia. Why don't you describe a little bit of what was going on down there near the Art Museum in Philadelphia, Matthew?
Yeah, well, we had the NFL Draft here, as most people in our area know, of course, for the last 3 days, from Thursday through Sunday, the Thursday through Saturday, I apologize. And, it's pretty much caused havoc for the people who live in and around the Parkway area, Ben Franklin Parkway here in Philly, as they set up. And this stage, my work assignment allowed me to get right to I was working both Thursday and Friday night right up at the stage, the main auditorium area. And this was an incredible temporary structure that they built right in the middle of the Ben Franklin Parkway. The lights, the spectacle, it was all fantastic. The crowds were fantastic, massive crowds for that first round on Friday night, especially for the time right around the draft and maybe all the way through, at least when the Eagles picked. I got one chance to look out over the crowd, and it was the way you would see these videos of like some huge rock concert, where you look out over the crowd and it's like a massive sea of humanity. That's the way this looked, and it was very impressive. And what was more impressive was that it was almost, that I know of, that it was incident free. I mean, Philadelphia really turned out for this. The city looked great. The event went off great. Crowds were fantastic. I don't think the weather was, phenomenal. It was almost like early summer weather rather than, mid-spring. And you could not have asked for a better event. And I think that the Eagles themselves did really well, too. That time will tell with that, but I think that their draft went really well.
Yeah, they really picked up a nice couple players there. But as you said, it was a world stage event almost with football fans that are NFL fans. And the NFL seems to do that really well. They seem to know how to work a crowd, so to speak, and attract a crowd. And they do it much better than Major League Baseball. For some reason, when the World Series starts, there's a buzz with real tried and true baseball fans, but for some reason the NFL knows how to create an event like that. And as you said, the big staging took them the better part of 2 weeks to set that up in the Art Museum area. And as you said, another thing, it was typically not very typical for Philadelphia, but it was trouble-free for the most part. And that's a great thing for Philly. And it was a nice fix for Philly in particular, because we have a bad name with fans for some reason, and maybe the NFL brought a Band-Aid and put some of that over the Philadelphia fans.
Yeah, we gave it we gave it to Commissioner Roger Goodell every time he showed up on the podium. The Boo Birds were out en masse for him, but it was mostly. It appeared to me, anyway, to be mostly lighthearted. And like I said, I was right down there on the front lines. I watched as on the first night of the draft, he came out. I got a little photo op with him to shake his hand briefly. And he was walking the front line there, shaking hands with the fans. When he first came out, they booed him unmercifully. And when he started walking along the front line and shaking everybody's hands, it was like the President of the United States walking the handshake line. Everybody was smiling and shaking his hand, wanting to take selfies with him, fist bumping him. So all these people that were booing him, like just 30 seconds earlier, as soon as he walked up to them and started shaking their hands, they were, they just transformed. So, and he was fantastic. If you talk about the way that he reacted to the fans, the way that he handled the event itself, the way that he talked about Philly up on that stage, I think despite the Boo Birds turning out for him, which is always the case, he handled the event well. The city did. The city has a lot to be proud of here. The Eagles have a lot to be proud of, and just a fantastic event for the NFL and for the city.
Yeah, and that's something I wish the Phillies would grasp onto, maybe have a fan fest in the spring. I know they have the caravans where they go to different cities where their minor league clubs are, and banquets and things like that, but give the common fan a chance. I know a lot of other MLB teams do that. They have fan fests. They open the stadium up to the fans, or they might do it in a inside venue because of the weather. Sometimes in late winter, getting towards the spring, it gets a little nasty. But come on, Phillies, why don't you take a cue from the NFL and get yourself a fan fest?
Well, and speaking of that, just so that you're aware, fans are aware, the Phillies do have some events like that. And the one big one that I know they have coming up, in fact, is on Thursday, May 11th. They have the 2017 Phillies Festival coming up at Citizens Bank Park. And like an autograph session, the meet and greet with the players, auction party where they auction off items to benefit the ALS fight. So, it's a really nice event. I've been to it before. They have photo opportunities, and they have the World Series trophy usually. I think Charlie's supposed to be this year with the World Series trophy. They have some games of chance, and some other games that you can get into. So the Phillies do things like that, and they have their winter car caravan, as you said. I think that the thing that stands out with this is the NFL has always been they're more of an event league than baseball is. Baseball is that steady every day. It's there for you for 7 months out of the year, if you count 8 months, or if you count from spring training right through the playoffs. It's like an everyday background noise. Whereas the NFL is like a 4-month fast hit where it's one game each week, big event with the Super Bowl. It's a one game. It's not like every day you're playing once a week. So I think the NFL, because of the way it's structured and set up, I think it plays to the one big event better than maybe baseball does. Baseball has some of those things with the All-Star game, but usually it's just they're two different sports, two different types of games. Both of them are fantastic. So I don't think baseball should try to be the NFL. I don't know that baseball draft would ever get to be as big as that thing was as far as the NFL draft goes. It's just not built as much for a one-day event. I think than football is.
That's well said, and I echo your sentiments about the festival coming up for the Phillies, May 11th, I believe it is.
Yes.
And I would wholeheartedly hope that a lot of fans go out to that. As Matt said, you can get autographs, you can sign up in advance. Of course, you have to pay for them. They're not free.
Sure.
But you get close up, you can have a word or two with some players. And, they do offer similar events where you can. One year I took a photo with two Phillies GMs, Ruben Amaro Jr. and Pat Gillick. That will never happen again. That's one of those events that is just a one-time thing. So if you get a chance, and like Matt said, maybe Charlie Manuel will be there this year, get a picture with him because those events don't come very often.
That's true.
Well, thanks, everyone, for listening to Phillies Talk. Matt, I want to thank you for being on the show again, and I'd love to have you back all season long with your commentary.
Rich, anytime. Like I said, people can catch me with Call to the Pen. If they want to Google calltothepen.com, just go to the About section in the search bar up top and flip through our writers and find me there. You can also find me on Twitter at Matthew Veasey, and I'm there regularly.
Very cool. Well, thanks very much, and have a great week, and welcome in May soon here for 2017 in Phillies baseball.
You got it, Rich. Go Phils.